Lucy Hartwell was 16 years old when her uncle's new wife made it clear there was no room for her in their household. It was June 1879 in Sage Valley, Wyoming Territory, and Lucy had exactly $7 she'd earned washing dishes at the town hotel, plus a wagon her father had built before dying 2 years earlier. Her mother had died when Lucy was 11 from scarlet fever. Her father, Samuel Hartwell, had raised her alone until dying in a ranch accident in 1877 when Lucy was 14. She'd lived with her Uncle Robert for 2 years, working to earn her keep, sleeping in the barn loft, staying out of the way. Then Robert married Edith Montgomery in May 1879. Edith made her position clear within 3 weeks. She wanted her own children in that house. She didn't want a teenage stepdaughter consuming resources and space. Robert, more interested in domestic peace than family obligation, told Lucy she could stay through June, then she needed to find other arrangements. Lucy chose to homestead. Wyoming Territory allowed single women to file homestead claims. 160 acres free if you built a dwelling and lived on the land for 5 years. At 16, she was old enough legally. She filed her claim on marginal land 8 miles from Sage Valley, rocky hillside that nobody wanted, poor for farming. But it had something valuable. A steep, south-facing slope perfect for dugout construction. Dugout cabins were frontier structures built into hillsides. You'd excavate into the slope, creating a room carved from earth. Build a front wall and door. Install a roof. The earth provided 3 walls naturally, offering exceptional insulation and protection from weather. Construction cost almost nothing because the materials were literally the hillside itself. Lucy had $7 and a wagon. She bought a good shovel for $2, a handsaw for $1.50, an axe for $2, and spent the remaining $1.50 on nails and a box of matches. She loaded her few possessions into the wagon her father had built and drove 8 miles to her homestead claim. The land was indeed poor, rocky soil, steep slopes, a small creek providing water. The south-facing hillside was perfect, steep enough for deep excavation, stable enough not to collapse. Positioned to catch maximum winter sun, she began digging on July 1st, selected a spot where the hillside rose steeply, marked out dimensions, 12 feet wide, 14 feet deep into the hill. That would create 168 square feet of living space, with earth forming 3 walls and most of the ceiling. The excavation was brutal work beyond anything Lucy had experienced. She'd dig into the hillside with her shovel, cutting into packed earth and clay, removing it bucket by bucket. Each shovelful had to be carried out of the deepening hole, dumped away from the entrance, then returned for another load. Endless repetition that destroyed her hands and back. The technique required precision she'd learned from watching miners work. You couldn't just dig randomly into a hillside and hope it stayed stable. You had to understand earth mechanics, had to recognize which soils held shape and which would collapse. The hillside was mostly clay with some rock, good for stability but difficult to excavate. She'd dig horizontally into the slope, removing earth to create the room dimensions. As she went deeper, she had to shore up the ceiling constantly to prevent collapse, cut cottonwood poles from the creek area and positioned them as temporary supports every 4 feet. Each pole had to be precisely sized. Too short and it wouldn't support, too long and it wouldn't fit. The work pattern became relentless routine. Dig for 30 minutes, removing maybe half a cubic yard of earth. Carry it out bucket by bucket, perhaps 15 buckets per session. Rest for 10 minutes with screaming back muscles. Install or adjust ceiling supports. Repeat, hour after hour, day after day. Her hands blistered within the first 3 days. The blisters broke and bled by day 4. By day 5, thick calluses were forming over the damaged skin, creating protective layers that allowed continued work despite the pain. Her shoulders burned constantly from the repeated motion of digging and carrying. Her back ached in ways she'd never experienced, muscles strained from bending and lifting hundreds of times daily. She was hungry constantly, rationing cornmeal carefully because she had no money for more food and no time to earn any. She'd mix cornmeal with creek water, cook it into a thick mush over a small fire, eat enough to sustain work, save the rest for the next meal. Lost weight rapidly, her already slim frame becoming gaunt from sustained physical labor and inadequate nutrition. Progress was measured in painful inches. She could excavate maybe 2 cubic yards per day, working from sunrise to sunset with brief breaks. The total excavation required approximately 60 cubic yards, 12 feet wide, 14 feet deep, 7 feet average height. That meant 30 days of digging if she maintained her brutal pace. 30 days of manual labor that most grown men would have struggled to accomplish. She slept in her wagon, ate sparingly from cornmeal and creek water, worked alone with no help. The townspeople who knew about her homestead claim considered it a joke. A 16-year-old girl building a dugout by herself. She'd give up within a week, return to town begging for domestic work. By day 10, the excavation was 6 feet deep into the hillside. The room was taking shape, earth walls on 3 sides. Opening at the front, where she'd build the 4th wall and door. Ceiling of packed earth supported by cottonwood poles. The town's mockery became public when Margaret Winters, the banker's wife, organized a concerned visit to the homestead site. 5 women rode out to see the hole Lucy was digging. "Child, you're building a cave, not a house. This is dangerous. The earth could collapse and bury you. You'll die out here attempting something beyond your capability. Accept proper work in town. The Miller family needs a housemaid." "I'm building a dugout cabin. It's proper homestead construction. The earth provides insulation. This will be warmer than any wooden cabin in the valley." "It's a hole in the ground. You're living like an animal. This is inappropriate for a young woman. You need to accept your situation and stop this foolish independence." Lucy kept digging. By August, the excavation was complete. 12 feet wide, 14 feet deep into the hillside, 7 feet high at the front, sloping to 6 feet at the back, where it met the earth ceiling. The 3 earth walls were smooth and stable. She'd hit mostly clay, which held its shape well and resisted moisture. Now came the construction phase. She needed to build a front wall, install a door, create a roof over the front portion, not covered by earth. She cut cottonwood logs from the creek area, small diameter, 4 to 6 inches, that she could move alone. Built a front wall of stacked logs, chinked with mud and grass, installed a door she built from rough-cut boards. The roof was the clever part. The back 2/3 of her dwelling was already roofed by the hillside earth above. The front third needed covering. She built a timber frame, extending from the earth ceiling forward to the front wall. Covered it with layers of brush, then sod blocks, creating a living roof that matched the earth covering the rest of her home. By early September, the dugout cabin was complete, 12 by 14 feet. 168 square feet of living space, 3 walls and most of the ceiling made from earth, 1 front wall of logs, 1 door, 1 small window. The entire structure built into the hillside, invisible from most angles, looking like a small barn facade built into a slope. The interior was dark but surprisingly warm even in September. The earth walls maintained constant temperature. The thick earth ceiling prevented heat loss. The south-facing position caught winter sun through the door and window. The whole structure was essentially underground living, sheltered, insulated, protected. The town called it a burrow. Said Lucy was living like a prairie dog. Said she'd proven she couldn't manage adult responsibilities. A 16-year-old girl living in a hole in the ground wasn't homesteading. It was failure. Through autumn, Lucy improved her dugout, plastered the interior earth walls with clay mixed with grass, creating smooth surfaces that didn't shed dirt. Built a small stone fireplace in one corner with a chimney that exited through the roof. created shelves carved directly into the earth walls, made a bed frame from cottonwood poles. The dugout became increasingly comfortable. She supported herself with odd jobs in town, washing, mending, any work that paid. Saved every penny for winter supplies. Bought a small cast-iron stove she could barely afford but needed desperately. November brought cold. Temperature dropped to 15 degrees overnight. Lucy's dugout, surrounded by earth on 5 sides, maintained 48 degrees inside with no fire burning. Just the earth's constant temperature keeping the space livable. When she burned a small fire in her stove, the temperature rose quickly to 65 degrees and stayed there for hours after the fire died. Her neighbors in wooden cabins were burning wood continuously, struggling to maintain 55 degrees. The earth-sheltered dugout was outperforming conventional construction with minimal heating. People noticed her small woodpile, drew wrong conclusions. The girl was cold. Was suffering in her hole. Was too proud to admit living in the ground didn't work. December came with the blizzard that changed everything and proved Lucy's underground dwelling superior to every conventional structure in Sage Valley. The storm arrived December 9th with minimal warning that longtime Wyoming residents should have recognized, but most dismissed. Morning started deceptively normal. 20 degrees and clear skies, cold but manageable for early December. Lucy worked her morning jobs in town, earning 50 cents washing dishes at the hotel, buying supplies she'd need for winter. By noon, fundamental atmospheric conditions had shifted. Temperature had dropped to 0 degrees in 6 hours, a 20-degree fall that should have sent people scrambling for final preparations. The sky turned grey-white in the distinctive way that preceded major storms. Wind shifted to come from directly north, bringing Arctic air straight down from Canada with nothing to moderate it across 1,000 miles of open plains. By 3 p.m., the first snow began. Not gentle flakes, but heavy, dense snow falling so thick it created whiteout conditions within 30 minutes. Visibility dropped to nothing. You couldn't see buildings 50 feet away, couldn't navigate familiar streets without disorientation. The world became white chaos. Temperature kept dropping with shocking speed. 0 became -10. -10 became -20. -20 became -30 by evening. Wind built from 20 miles per hour to 40, then sustained at 50 miles per hour with gusts reaching 70. The combination of -35 degrees and 50-mile-per-hour wind created effective temperature approaching -65 degrees. Exposed skin froze solid in under a minute. Breathing unprotected air caused immediate lung damage from ice crystal formation. Walking outside meant risking death within 5 minutes if you couldn't find shelter immediately. This wasn't normal Wyoming winter. This was Arctic assault conditions that killed livestock in fields, that froze water lines solid, that revealed catastrophically which structures could maintain life and which couldn't. Lucy's dugout, buried in the hillside with earth surrounding it on 5 sides, barely noticed the external temperature change. The earth 4 feet deep stayed at 45 degrees, regardless of surface conditions. Her interior, insulated by tons of earth, maintained 50 degrees with no fire burning. When she lit her small stove, the space warmed to 65 degrees quickly and held that temperature for 10 hours after the fire died. Her neighbors were in crisis by hour 3. The Patterson family's wooden cabin couldn't maintain 45 degrees, despite burning wood continuously. Their children were developing hypothermia indoors. The Wilson cabin was consuming wood at rates that would exhaust their supply within 2 days. The Henderson family had a cracked stovepipe and couldn't heat safely. At midnight, desperate pounding on Lucy's door. She woke from light sleep, never sleeping deeply during storms, and opened the door carefully. Sarah Patterson stood there, frost-covered and barely coherent, having walked the quarter-mile from her cabin through conditions that should have killed her. "Our children," Sarah managed, voice hoarse from cold, damaged throat. "Hypothermic. Cabin won't stay warm. Can we come, please?" Lucy looked at her 168 square feet. Could she fit 6 more people? The mathematics worked. Body heat from 7 people would add 700 BTU per hour. The earth walls would absorb and redistribute that heat. The space was small enough that crowding would actually help maintain temperature. "Yes, bring your family quickly." The Patterson family arrived within 30 minutes. James Patterson carrying their youngest child, age 3, showing dangerous signs of hypothermia, lethargy, confusion, skin grey-blue despite being indoors moments before. Sarah holding the hands of 2 middle children, both shivering violently. Their oldest daughter, age 10, walking on her own but clearly weakened from sustained cold exposure. They crowded into the dugout, and the transformation was immediate. The warm air, 60 degrees maintained by earth insulation and small fire, shocked their cold-damaged systems. The children began crying as circulation returned painfully to frozen extremities. Sarah sat holding her hypothermic toddler, rubbing warmth back into tiny limbs, tears streaming down her face with relief and residual terror. "Your cabin is warm," James said, voice filled with disbelief. "Actually warm. Our cabin can't stay above 45, despite burning wood continuously for 8 hours. We've consumed half our winter supply trying to keep the children alive. This hole in the ground—" He stopped, realizing his words. "This dugout is warmer than our expensive cabin." "How is this possible?" Lucy explained simply. "Earth temperature 4 feet deep stays constant at 45 degrees, regardless of surface conditions. 5 sides of this room are surrounded by Earth. The Earth acts as thermal mass, stores heat, releases it slowly, prevents cold infiltration. Your cabin has thin wooden walls. My dugout has tons of Earth providing insulation." Within 2 hours, more desperate arrivals. The Wilson family, parents and 3 children, whose cabin was consuming wood so fast they'd run out within 2 days at current rates. The Henderson family, whose cracked stovepipe meant they couldn't heat safely. The young Turner couple, newlyweds in their early 20s, whose small cabin was death trap in these conditions. By 2 a.m., 18 people were packed into Lucy's dugout cabin. Adults sitting with backs against the earth walls, knees drawn up, shoulders touching neighbors. Children layered together in the sleeping area Lucy had created, youngest in the warmest center positions. Everyone pressed together in a space designed for one person, but functioning perfectly for emergency shelter. The physics worked exactly as Earth shelter principles predicted. 18 people at rest generate approximately 1,800 BTU per hour metabolically. Lucy's small stove added another 2,000 BTU. Total heat input of 3,800 BTU, warming approximately 900 cubic feet, the actual air volume after accounting for bodies and furnishings. That was more than 4 BTU per cubic foot per hour, more than adequate for maintaining comfortable temperature despite minus 35 degrees outside. The earth walls absorbed excess heat during peak production and released it during lulls. The earth ceiling prevented any upward heat loss. The south-facing entrance minimized cold infiltration when the door was opened. The dugout, built by a 16-year-old with $7, was maintaining 18 people at 62 degrees during conditions that were killing exposed animals and overwhelming expensive wooden construction. The hole in the ground everyone had mocked was proving superior through simple but profound understanding. Earth integration provides thermal stability that conventional construction cannot match. Lucy managed the small stove, maintaining temperature with minimal fuel. The packed earth walls absorbed heat and released it slowly. The earth ceiling prevented any heat loss upward. The south-facing entrance minimized cold air infiltration. The whole structure functioned as designed, maximum thermal efficiency through earth integration. The blizzard lasted 32 hours. Through all of it, 18 people stayed warm in the dugout the town had called a burrow. The cabin built by a 16-year-old with $7 saved lives when $1,000 wooden structures failed. When the storm ended December 11th, families emerged to find their wooden cabins barely above freezing, their fuel supplies dangerously depleted, their children cold despite desperate heating efforts. Robert Hartwell, Lucy's uncle who'd asked her to leave, came to the dugout on December 12th, stood looking at the hillside entrance, at the structure he'd dismissed as a whole, at the dwelling that had saved 18 lives, including families he knew. "You were right and I was wrong. About everything. I'm sorry I asked you to leave. Sorry I didn't help you build this. You understood something about survival we all missed." The community transformed overnight. The girl living in a hole became the architect everyone needed to consult. The structure people had mocked became the example everyone wanted to study and replicate. Robert Hartwell, Lucy's uncle who'd asked her to leave, came to the dugout on December 12th, after the storm had passed and the valley was assessing damage. He stood looking at the small entrance built into the hillside, at the structure he'd called inappropriate and dangerous, at the dwelling that had saved 18 lives, including families he'd known since childhood. He stood there silently for a long moment before speaking. "I owe you an apology that words can't adequately express. I asked you to leave because I thought you were too young to manage independence, because I listened to my wife instead of helping my brother's child, because I assumed a girl your age couldn't possibly succeed at homesteading." "You were wrong about all of it," Lucy said simply, not angry, but stating fact. "I did succeed. I built something that works. And when people needed help, my dugout saved them while conventional cabins failed. I know, and I'm ashamed that I didn't help you, that I dismissed your plans as foolish, that I thought living underground meant failure when it actually meant understanding something we all missed, that Earth provides better shelter than we give it credit for." The transformation extended beyond individual apologies. By the end of December, 8 families had approached Lucy, asking for consultation on earth shelter construction. They'd bring sketches, ask questions about hillside selection, excavation techniques, structural safety, thermal performance. She taught them freely and in detail, would take interested people to her homestead and show them the actual construction. "You need a south-facing slope," she'd explain, standing on the hillside above her dugout. "South-facing catches winter sun, provides natural warmth. The slope needs to be steep enough for deep excavation, at least 45 degrees. The soil needs to be stable. Clay is best. Sandy soil can collapse." She'd show them inside the dugout, explaining every feature. "The earth walls stay at constant temperature, about 45 degrees year-round at 4 feet depth. That's your baseline. In summer, 45 degrees is cooling. In winter, it's warming. You're starting from 45 instead of from outside temperature. That's huge advantage. The ceiling needs support during construction," she'd demonstrate with the exposed ceiling poles. "Cut cottonwood or pine poles, position them every 4 feet, leave them in place permanently. They prevent collapse. The earth ceiling is your best insulation. 6 feet of earth above you means heat doesn't escape upward at all." James Patterson, whose family had been first to seek shelter in the dugout, became Lucy's most enthusiastic student. Started building his own earth shelter using her principles. "I'm keeping my wooden cabin for regular living," he explained, "but I'm building a dugout as emergency shelter. If we get another storm like that, I want somewhere my family can survive with minimal fuel." Margaret Winters, who'd organized the intervention telling Lucy to accept domestic work, came to apologize formally and publicly. Invited Lucy to her home, the banker's house, the finest in Sage Valley. Served her tea like an honored guest. "I was completely wrong about you," Margaret said directly. "I thought you were being foolish and stubborn. Building a dugout seemed like admitting defeat, like living in poverty. I didn't understand that you were building something superior to conventional construction. Your dugout saved 18 lives. My expensive house would have failed just as badly as everyone else's. I'm sorry for trying to pressure you into servitude. You were right to trust your own judgment. Lucy lived in her dugout for 11 years, from age 16 to 27. The structure that everyone had called temporary became her permanent home through choice, not necessity. She discovered advantages to earth-sheltered living that went beyond emergency thermal performance. Summer cooling was remarkable. When surface temperatures reached 90 degrees, her dugout interior stayed at 60 degrees with no active cooling. The earth surrounding her on 5 sides provided natural climate control. She'd open the door and window in evening to allow cool air circulation, close them during day to maintain comfortable temperature. While neighbors sweltered in wooden cabins that became ovens in summer sun, Lucy lived in constant comfort. Winter heating costs were minimal. She'd burn perhaps 2 cords of wood per winter, 1/5 what conventional cabins consumed. The earth shelter required so little supplemental heating that she could work full-time in town without worrying about maintaining fires. The dugout's baseline 45-degree temperature meant even complete fire loss overnight wouldn't create dangerous cold. The homestead claim process worked in her favor. At 18, she formally filed her claim with the land office, documenting 2 years of continuous residence and improvements. The skeptical clerk who'd warned her about dangers of solo female homesteading had to acknowledge her success. The dugout counted as permanent dwelling. The land improvements, fencing, water development, structures, satisfied requirements. At 23, 5 years after initial occupation, she received full title to 160 acres. The marginal land nobody wanted became valuable grazing land she leased to cattle ranchers. The rocky hillsides that couldn't support crops provided excellent forage. The creek provided water. She earned steady income from lease payments, more than she'd ever made washing dishes or mending clothes. The homestead everyone thought would fail became economically productive property. By 1885, 6 years after Lucy's dugout proved itself, 9 earth-sheltered structures existed in Sage Valley area. The Patterson family's emergency dugout. The Wilson family's combination root cellar and winter shelter. 3 families who'd built dugouts as primary dwellings after learning from Lucy's example. The architectural landscape of the valley had changed because a 16-year-old had proven earth shelter viability. She married at 27 to Daniel Morrison, a homesteader who'd come to Wyoming in 1884 and specifically sought Lucy out after hearing about her dugout construction expertise. He wasn't looking for a wife who needed support. He wanted a partner who understood frontier survival and could contribute equally to homestead success. They built a larger house together, still incorporating earth shelter principles, but with more space for the family they planned. The structure was hybrid design, partially dug into a hillside with earth berming on north, east and west sides, but with larger south-facing windows and conventional front wall. The original dugout remained as emergency shelter, root cellar and cool storage. Lucy and Daniel raised 4 children on the homestead. She taught each of them earth shelter principles, thermal dynamics, the advantage of working with natural materials instead of fighting them. 2 of her children became architects who specialized in earth-integrated designs. 1 moved to Colorado and built earth-sheltered homes commercially. The other worked in Montana, teaching sustainable building practices. The original dugout functioned for 63 years. Lucy lived in it for 11 years solo, then used it for storage and emergency shelter for another 5 decades. When she died in 1938 at age 75, the dugout was still structurally sound, still functional, still demonstrating principles she'd proven at 16. The Wyoming Historical Society acquired the property in 1965. Modern thermal analysis confirmed everything Lucy had understood intuitively. Earth at 4-foot depth maintains constant temperature regardless of surface conditions. Earth shelter construction provides exceptional R value, estimated at R30 to R40 depending on depth. The dugout's thermal performance exceeded modern insulated wooden construction by significant margin. The historical marker reads, Lucy Hartwell Morrison, 1863 to 1938. Homesteader who built earth-sheltered dugout cabin at age 16. Structure sheltered 18 people during 1879 blizzard. Demonstrated that earth integration creates superior thermal performance to conventional construction. The real story is about a 16-year-old kicked out with nothing who built shelter from a hillside, who survived when everyone said she'd fail, who saved 18 people by understanding Earth's thermal properties better than adults understood expensive construction. Because sometimes the girl building a hole in the ground knows more about physics than people building with lumber and money. The dugout everyone mocked was the only structure that actually worked when weather turned lethal. And Earth, when you understand how to use it, provides better shelter than wood.